Hey there, and welcome back to Utility Sports. In today's video, we have a really fun one for you. We are doing a Gradey Dick scouting profile. There's a lot of things that are pretty controversial about him. Some people love him, some people hate him. The Wichita Wizard is a very curious case in this NBA draft. Now we're going to take a look at the preview, take a look at exactly what we're covering in this video. Player info, we got the strengths and weaknesses, player comparison, the estimated draft range, and then the overall thoughts from both of us and what we can really expect from him as a prospect. So if you kind of look here, he's kind of a meme. He's kind of a meme. A lot of people know him not as much as like his skill, but he's become such a big meme because of his name. The people at KU absolutely loved him, though. Really fun player, really fun. Is probably one of the more well-known players in the entire draft class, but his play can definitely back it up. When you watched him throughout the course of the season, this guy is super electric. To be
right, how can you not love this guy? I mean, look at him. Look at him on the right side there, and his famous interviews, press conferences where he says pause at really convenient moments. It's kind of a perfect combination for a prospect that's been kind of a lot of fun this year. Obviously evaluating him, he's a very good prospect, but also some of his media influence and stuff like that. He's got t-shirts saying big energy, and with his last name there, the University of Kansas had some fun with their school newspaper as well. So he's been a lot of fun to talk about, but I'm really excited for the scouting profile, Austin.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're going to go ahead and jump right into it here. We have some of the player information. He's 19 years old. He's going to be 20 when it comes around to being November. 6'8", 205. Good frame. Really good frame for a wing there. We don't know the overall length, but I do believe when you actually look at him, he's going to be a pretty lengthy prospect overall. Production-wise, that's pretty good. 14 points per game, 5 rebounds per game, 1.7 assists per game, 1.4 steals per game. That is definitely relevant in this. Is not labeled as a terrific defender, but we will get into that a little bit later on and get a little more specific and detailed with it. 44, 40, and 85 splits. He, for most of the season, he was shooting about 43% from three, which was, awesome. Super dynamic. And however, at the end of the season, he cooled off a little bit. But that's okay, because when we talk about the degree of difficulty for some of these shots, he's not just a corner sitter. He's not just a guy that can shoot going one way. That's why he's relevant. This is why he is a prospect that is really worth considering in the lottery. But once again, we'll cover more of that later.
Yeah, I wanted to touch on the player information real quick too. I know some people as a true freshman might be concerned, oh, he's almost 20 years old. His age is actually very similar to Brandon Miller, who obviously has been in the conversation for a top 4 selection this year. And you look at the size as well, he's very similar to Brandon Miller, again, in terms of actual physical frame. The way that he's built, he's actually probably a little bit stronger currently than Brandon Miller is as well. And then obviously we don't have the length listed currently. Draft combine is going to be important for him. But a guy named Gradey Dick, I don't think is going to be lacking in the length department if you're reading in between the lines there, Austin.
Yeah, so now we're going to take a look at some of the strengths, and we've kind of highlighted it a little bit earlier, but the shooting is a big deal. Not only does he have the numbers to back it up, you look at the form, you look at the release point, there's a lot to love about what he brings to the table. His efficiency with a degree of difficulty is a beautiful thing, right? Because you have to always take numbers with a grain of salt when you look at things. Some guys are corner sitters that a lot of times are just taking their shots and they're wide open. Yes, but Gradey Dick is a little bit different than that. He's a selective shooter, but there's times he has to have, there's times where he gets off the tough shots, right? He's not just sitting wide open. There's times at certain points of the game, especially in clutch time, you need a big shot. This guy can't provide it. He did it all season.
Right. I think the biggest thing here with his shooting as well, Austin, I think you nailed all the points in terms of the difficulty and things like that. But at the end of the day, a lot of the mainstream media is going to tell you the field goal percentage, the 3-point percentage, which those things are important. And ultimately that shows the production. But Gradey Dick's one of those players who I think is going to be immune to long stretches of poor shooting at the NBA level because of the technique, the fundamentals that he has baked into his ability as a shooter. I chose this graphic intentionally. Look at where he's releasing this basketball. Significant elevation on his jump shot, specifically with where he's actually shooting the basketball from. Very high release point. Austin, before the video here, you were saying this is going to be an unblockable shot. And at the NBA level, it's going to be nearly impossible to contest him. I actually have a few videos that are going to be playing here on the screen as well, where we look at Gradey Dick as somebody who plays with immense balance, which is one of the most important things as a shooter, which is part of why I don't think that there's going to be any issue with Gradey Dick ever in his NBA career as a shooter. You know, he might be immune to some of those 0 of 6, 0 of 7 nights even that we've seen from some of the better shooters in the league, guys like Malik Beasley and such. I think Gradey Dick is a phenomenal prospect simply based on one skill alone. You look at where the NBA currently sits with the importance of three-point shooting, the importance of spacing, which we'll talk about a little bit more later on. Gradey Dick has the most coveted skill in the NBA right now for role players. And there's other things to his game that we're also going to talk about, but with his ability to play off the dribble, play off the catch, he can space out the floor and he can knock down shots. You're going to see a clip here playing now where he actually takes the dribble off of the right wing, working toward the left off a pick and roll. And you're going to see, first of all, his feet are set, balanced, square. He's got a very nice center of balance here in this clip. And you're also going to see that his feet are in a position where they are directly pointing toward the rim, which is, grade book, textbook teaching for shooting. And then you look at the elevation he gets on his jump shot. There's no way that someone's going to consistently contest this. And we saw moments throughout the year where teams do contest him really, really well. And at the end of the day, it doesn't matter because the ball still ends up finding the hoop and usually finding the cords as well as he rips the net open with a variety of three-point shots. You could make a 10, 15-minute highlight reel of this guy just shooting. He's one of the best shooters I've ever evaluated. There's no surprise that he was hovering around that 43% mark from three for most of the year, Austin, like you talked about. He's able to move going left, going right as a shooter. Again, very comfortable as a catch and shoot guy. There's not very many instances where a guy's worse as a catch and shoot guy. Gradey Dick will be very, very lethal on an NBA court, and he also plays with a lot of really good range. There's going to be no adjustment period for him to the NBA three-point line. And he does other stuff as well that makes a team trying to limit his shooting. There's going to be ways to counteract that and counterbalance that, Austin. And for the shooting, we know how important it is, which brings me into my next point here on gravity and utility. And I chose a old image here from Jimmy Butler's time in Philadelphia and how important JJ Redick was playing next to Ben Simmons, Joel Embiid, Jimmy Butler, Tobias Harris. You think of those four players together, and there's not a lot of spacing specifically from behind the three-point line. But look at this. JJ Redick's on the complete opposite side of the court from where the ball is. And Kyle Lowry has two hands on him, completely outside of help positioning. And that's the effect that a guy like JJ Redick can have. And I think Gradey Dick's going to bring that similar gravity, which is one of the most important words when talking about NBA fits and how this guy plays and how he's going to impact his team being successful and spacing the court and playing off of guys. Because he's just going to naturally have so much gravity to him that he's going to pull his defender way away from the rim. Every scouting report's going to have Gradey Dick circled and say, do not let this guy get open shots. And even with those contested ones, he's probably still going to make it. And Austin, you know how important gravity is. Like, just the ability to have spacing, opening up the floor for your best players. Gradey Dick, in my opinion, is top 2, top 3 in this class for sure, just in that regard alone.
Yeah, absolutely. I think when you talk about gravity, it's really opening up the lane for others. And now this is something that is not directly seen and valued by certain people and some casual fans, if you will, because when you look at that adds value to a team. Yes, the percentages are nice. Yes, he's a good three-point shooter, but what is a big reason why they're so important is creating spacing, having that ability to open up the lane, especially if he gets on a team that has little to no shooting. It's going to be a tremendous deal for them. But as we stated and that we've talked about in the past, you can't just only be a shooter. You have to have some other qualities to your game.
Right, and that's where that utility comes into play here. Another thing about shooters, when you have somebody who everyone on the scouting report knows, hey, we do not want this guy to get open touches, they become the best flex screeners in the NBA. Right now, like, you think about some of the best players, Steph Curry as a screener is almost unstoppable because nobody in their right mind is going to leave Steph Curry for even a second intentionally. So you utilize the guy as a screener. I'm going to try and find some clips of this across some NBA games where, teams are utilizing one of their better shooters as a screen guy. Specifically in Spain, action is very popular, but you also see it in a variety of different manners, flex cuts like I talked about earlier. There's a lot of different ways in which creative coaches can use a shooter to open up really open shots for players who typically don't score as much, or for opening up the star player in general. And I think Gradey Dick's going to be fantastic in this regard, because not only does he have the length and size to finish around the rim a little bit more than even a guy like JJ Redick did, but I also think that he's a little bit wider, a little bit stronger, which is also going to help him in that regard too. I think he's going to be really fantastic as a screener in the NBA. And I know, people might be saying, oh, how many times do we want our shooting guard / small forward to be a big screen setter? I think it's going to be fantastic, specifically off the ball. And this is one of those things, you think about some of the teams that are kind of in or around that lottery right now. You think about Orlando, Toronto, some Eastern Conference examples there. Those teams badly need that spacing that we talked about, Austin, and the utility of a screen setter off the ball would be fantastic for some guys like Gary Trent Jr., OG Anunoby. You think about Paulo Banchero, Franz Wagner receiving off-ball screens where they're given flex cut opportunities towards the rim, or working off of a pin down flare because a team doesn't want to leave Gradey Dick open in the corner. Those types of things are fantastic. And, you might watch every single thing this guy does with the basketball. There's even more value to him when he doesn't have it, which I think is one of the most underrated elements to most shooters when they come out of college, but specifically a guy like Gradey Dick who can really fill it up.
Yeah, so kind of moving on now, we have activity level. Activity level, Sheldon, very important. Not just being a stand and shoot guy, but being active elsewhere. What else are you doing to contribute to the game? What other ways are you affecting the outcome? And I think this is pretty evident when you watch him. Now, Sheldon, I want you to explain to people what does activity really mean to you? It means different things to different people, but I think for the most part, it's all kind of common knowledge and what a person should expect from him.
Yeah, I think that activity level, especially for a shooter like Gradey Dick, is so important at the NBA level. I think two key words that actually fit into alliteration, controlled chaos, is a really great way to put it. The fact that Gradey Dick is going to be somebody who, obviously we know he can knock down perimeter shots, and teams are going to be worried about him. First of all, he's not going to get left open very often, but he's going to be very adept and very understanding of how he needs to move without the basketball to open up opportunities, whether that's working off some pin down flares himself, working off of some elevator sets. He understands that. He's been doing that his entire basketball career, whether that was at Sunrise Christian in Wichita, whether that was at Kansas, and whatever team he'll be playing on in the NBA, he'll also be doing those types of actions where he knows how to move without the basketball. He knows how to set his feet, get balanced, and shoot. You'll see clips of that. But I think the really most impressive thing for me watching him is how active he is on the offensive glass. We obviously saw his rebounding numbers earlier. He's probably one of the better offensive rebounding wings I've ever evaluated. Now, I'm not talking about 25 years of data here, but I'm talking about what my eye test is telling me. And Gradey Dick is somebody who, most people are going to have to be worried about 25 feet away from the hoop. The fact that he's extremely willing to crash the boards, and then he knows what to do with it as well afterward. You're going to see clips of him throwing down some nasty putback dunks, which is something you look at him and you might not think that's going to be on the scouting report. You got to box this kid out. He also knows that when he crashes, he's going to do a very nice job of maybe finding an open teammate afterward, especially when you break in a defense like that by grabbing an offensive board. Usually everyone's kind of in collapse mode. He could probably kick it out for a three to some of his teammates, or he also does a very nice job finding some cutters out of those situations. You'll see a clip of that here too. And then you also look at just his ability and his willingness to work harder than other guys. I think that he as a skill player is very intriguing to me as a top 10, top 14 pick in this year's draft. But then you also throw in the elements of, hey, this guy's going to get on the floor. This guy's going to crash the offensive glass. He's going to be active. He's going to buy into whatever you want to do offensively. He's going to be willing to set screens. He's going to be willing to run off screens. He's willing to do all the hard work. And I think that's one of those things that gets very overlooked throughout the process, especially by, kind of mainstream media and the way that people like to talk about the prospects. Obviously points per game, rebounds per game. Those are the things that mainly get highlighted, and understandably so. But there's things that when you watch this kid actually play, there's stuff that pops out to me that I don't think he's gotten enough love for this year. He was a big part of Kansas's success, obviously disappointing end to their season. But his willingness to do the dirty work as a shooter, kind of a rare thing that we don't typically see a ton. Most shooters you kind of think of as more frail, unwilling to crash the boards. Gradey Dick doesn't really fall into that criteria because of his willingness to do some of these things in areas like crashing the glass and working his tail off to fight for possessions.
Now, kind of taking a look here, once again, we have another strength here that you've highlighted, attacking closeouts, super valuable, and something that is very evident throughout the course of the season for Gradey Dick, and it was pretty consistent from start to finish. This was a big strength of his. Let's kind of highlight that a little bit and explain a little bit further in depth what you saw.
Right. Whenever you get to a shooter, you know, I've been talking about how valuable he is as a shooter and how much he's going to space the court. Team defenses are going to be aware of that. So anytime you break down a defense, specifically when your best player has the ball and he creates an advantage by beating a guy one-on-one or working out of the pick and roll, and if there's help coverage, then if Gradey Dick gets left open for a second, the entire defense is going to know, oh my gosh, we got to run this guy off the three-point line. And we've seen some three-point shooters in the past who can't thrive in that regard. You know, you think about a guy like Reggie Bullock, Austin, who you and I consistently laugh about being unable to dribble the basketball as an NBA player. Gradey Dick doesn't fall into that. He's somebody who can knock down mid-range jump shots. He's able to play off the bump. What I mean by that, he's willing to draw a little bit of contact while handling the basketball and get to spots on the court where he knows what he's going to be able to do. He works very hard in some of his training regimen to set himself up for game-like success, which you're going to see in a variety of clips throughout this video today. And then also just his willingness to get to the rim too. Again, the athleticism I think is surprising. You know, obviously we've heard that from Chris Collinsworth plenty of times on football broadcasts, but I really think it does apply here to Gradey Dick because of, you know, people just don't expect him as a shooter, his skill set, the things he presents skill-wise, to be this guy who's going to fly in the air, throw down some nasty dunks, you know, hit some guys with reverse layups that are, honestly, when he starts them, you think there's no way he's going to finish this, and then he does. I think he's just a very well-rounded player. He's a three-level scorer where his main skill is three-point shooting and spacing the floor, but he's got a lot of skills that I think benefit his game in other ways and are going to make him a very tough cover because you just can't take him out of a game by running him off the three-point line, which I think is so important, Austin. And, you know, with some of your, you know, with some of the examples we talked about, Reggie Bullock, Austin, how important do you think that is to the game in general, having a guy who can attack closeouts like Gradey Dick's capable of?
And this is a reason why he very well could be going in the lottery, is for reasons like that, because a guy that can shoot as a standstill shooter and shoot it at a very effective clip, that's you're probably looking more tail end of the teens, and then the early 20s is where you see a guy like that. But some of these other additional strengths that you see with him is a reason why you can see him propel potentially into the lottery, because having those other assets to your game are super important. The ability to actually attack a closeout is, you know, tremendous, and he's got to get better as a playmaker, which we're actually going to highlight pretty quick.
Yeah, it's one of the next topics. Obviously, we got defense in here too. You look at him defensively, and as a lot of people would have guessed, he's not the best defender. I think part of that is he plays a little flat-footed. The graphic I chose here is intentional, trying to stop a guy, and you look at his foot, he's not nearly at all on the balls of his feet, which, you know, I think that there's going to be a little bit of, you know, coaching technique help that can go into that. Now, I don't think NBA coaches consistently do the best job in actually helping a player progress on that end of the floor, but you know, I think he's going to be a solid team defender. I think he's not going to screw up scouting reports, which is half the battle, honestly, when we're talking about NBA players and their understanding of, okay, this player's going to do this for that team. How do I stop their team-oriented goals? I think Gradey Dick's going to excel in those areas. For Kansas, he wasn't a huge negative defensively, but it is a different game at the NBA level. Again, more spacing, the court's bigger, the players are more athletic, especially vertically and laterally. I think that's going to be one area where he struggles. And to be honest, Gradey Dick, sometimes you don't even have to be a terrible defender to get viewed as a terrible defender, especially at the NBA level. I'm telling you, if this guy's in NBA playoff basketball right now, every single team in the league is walking him up to the level of the screen, Austin, and they're going to treat him like Luke Kennard and say, okay, let's dance. And, you know, not that Gradey Dick's bad in those situations. He's got the length, he's got the size at 6'8" that you say, okay, we'll live with that. But it's not like this guy's going to be some defensive stopper. And you just have to understand that. This is a reason why he's not a top 5 player in this class, in my opinion. You think about, you know, some of the better wing shooters that we've seen in the past, the guys who can defend, like Jabari Smith, what was kind of the hope for him. There's a reason he goes top 3 in the draft, whereas Gradey Dick this year will not. You could also argue that this year's draft is significantly better. I would also agree with that, even though I loved last year's class as well. Gradey Dick's, I think, a good player. I think he's a great overall team player. I think he's going to not be a huge negative for team defense, but individually he's limited, which I think is one of the biggest concerns for me. And then let's jump into that playmaking, Austin, that you talked about. How important is playmaking, and what does it really mean for a prospect like Gradey Dick?
Yeah, and it really speaks to attacking the closeout, because you're going to have, help side rotations over there, and being able to hit a guy in the corner is super important in terms of making that offense run. And that's part of it. If you attack a closeout, get to the rim, and you're not able to fire that pass, that's not a very, very easy clear line path of a pass. I mean, how valuable is that? It's really not. So this is part of the progression for him. And, a lot of guys his size, it's always kind of an issue, right? Because their whole life, they've just been bigger. They've been able to shoot over guys. They've been able to get to the rim easy, but playmaking is kind of an art that's somewhat lost, especially for wings, right? So the guys that are super valuable in the league, like Luka and LeBron and things of that nature, they can all play make at that size, 6'7", 6'8". So that's why I think it's super important for him to progress, and that's how he can, to me, earn a very, very large contract in the next time. If he doesn't progress at all, there's going to be a little bit of concerns, obviously with his defensive liabilities that he's had. He's never going to be an elite defender. The most you could probably hope for is a competitive defender. Maybe that's what we want to call it. But for him, playmaking is going to really ascend his game.
Yeah, I think so as well, Austin. I think you nailed it there. Gradey Dick's going to make a lot of money in his career. The way shooters are valued right now, you think about, the money that a guy like Luke Kennard's made throughout his career. Those guys make a ton of money simply because there's so much value attached to what can this guy do for our offense? What can he do for our overall flow, consistency? A guy like Gradey Dick really, really is going to help a lot in those areas. But I think the three most important words right now in terms of draft evaluation and honestly team building and ability to put talent on the court in the NBA, the three words are dribble, pass, shoot. We know that Gradey Dick shoots it very well. We know he's capable of putting it on the deck as a ball handler to a certain extent and then scoring off of that. The next step is that passing, right? Like, he's not at a spot right now where in the half court he can consistently make the right pass. Now, he doesn't turn the ball over. I don't think he's a terrible decision maker. I just don't think he puts enough pressure on the rim and on a defense as a guy who's going to draw multiple help defenders. Now, he does do that to a certain extent, but this guy's not going to be some high flyer type, finisher who shoots 6 to 7 shots around the rim a game. He's not going to be the Giannis, the Luka, the LeBron, like you talked about, Austin, which is A-okay. Not every team is going to have 4, 5, 6 of those guys. Those are the star players. Typically, playmaking goes a long way in whether a player's a star or not because of how much pressure they can individually put on team defense and then take advantage of that. Gradey Dick's not going to be that, but I think that, we've seen flashes in transition where he's attacking downhill, fits a nice little bounce pass in. You'll see a clip of that in this video as well. I think Gradey Dick does have a lot of nice aspects to him, and I think he's going to grow as a playmaker. He's not a willing passer. So he's somebody who he plays in the flow of the offense. It doesn't ever feel like he's just out there to chuck shots. I think he's going to be a great team player. It's just you can't really rely on this guy to be a focal point for offensive creation for others. But most shooters aren't that way. You think about a guy like Malik Beasley, Luke Kennard, I think a little bit better of a playmaker than what we've seen out of Gradey Dick so far. But that's kind of the hope, is if Gradey Dick can kind of grow as a playmaker a little bit more, maybe he gets to that Luke Kennard level, what we saw in Detroit his final year there, where he's averaging about 4.5 assists a game. I mean, if Gradey Dick got to that point at the NBA level, it would be a dream come true for his development. I think it would go a long way in making him a little bit more dangerous, dynamic as a player going downhill. But still, as a finisher, I think he's a player who he's going to finish plays more than he's going to create them for others. But that's still very, very valuable in today's NBA.
Now, kind of looking at the player comparison, you have taller JJ Redick. Now, a lot of people are going to ask a lot of questions. Is it because of the shooting? But it goes a lot further than just the shooting. It's the off-ball movement, things of that nature. Some of the degree of difficulty in his shots. Explain why this is such a perfect comparison.
Yeah, I think JJ Redick's a very good comp. I don't think there's a perfect comparison out there completely for him, because I think a little bit more than JJ Redick, I think he's a little bit more comfortable with the ball in his hands. But at the same time, I think that the defensive limitations are going to be there. I think he's going to be a smart player. I think he's going to get attacked in the postseason, though. similar to what we saw for JJ Redick throughout his career. You think back to early days in Orlando where he wasn't getting a ton of play time, some of the Lob City Clippers days as well. He was always kind of the guy with a huge red X on him because teams knew to attack that guy. I think Gradey Dick's going to have some of those similar issues at the NBA level, but he's bigger, which is very important. You can't understate the importance of size at the NBA level. It's more of a deterrent than anything. I think it plays a way bigger factor than most people understand. Which is what makes Victor Wembanyama this year so incredible, because he's going to be 5 inches taller than pretty much every center he faces, which is incredible. But, for a guy like Gradey Dick, I think JJ Redick, you nailed it, Austin, with the off-ball movement, the willingness to be a screen setter. He's just going to be a perfect buy-in player to a team that, could really badly need shooting. I think about some landing spots. Funny enough, Orlando, I think would be probably the preferred landing spot in this year's draft. Maybe the New Orleans Pelicans, they do have the Lakers swap depending, obviously, down the stretch of the season here. With the time we're recording this, we don't exactly know where that's going to shape out. But I think that there's some options for teams that would make a lot of sense for Gradey Dick, and he'd make their team offense so much better, similar to what we saw with JJ Redick in his Philly days specifically, which is why I chose to include him here on this graphic.
Yeah, kind of moving on to our next segment here is the estimated draft range. Now, once again, we've highlighted it a couple times already, but we're going to kind of confirm that. Now, we've talked lottery, and do you think there's a chance that he falls, and what would be the reason for his fall?
I would be really shocked if he fell outside of the lottery. Now, crazy things happen. Last year, I thought AJ Griffin should have been a lottery pick, and he actually fell out of that as well. Now, he did have some concerns about a knee injury history that Gradey Dick does not have. Gradey Dick's, I think, too good of a player to fall outside of the lottery. He needs to be a lottery selection. To be honest, as of where things are right now, I like him as a top 10-ish player in this draft. So if, say, Orlando ends up picking 6th overall, 7th overall, I would not rule that out. I think that's maybe the high end for where he goes. I would be just as shocked if he's a top 5 pick as I would be if he's outside of the lottery. I think anywhere from that 6-7 range to 13-14 is kind of that sweet spot. My real landing spot's about 9 or 10, but it really depends on which team ends up picking where. But you think about some of the teams in that range, and every team can add shooting. That's the most overstated thing ever. But a player like Gradey Dick who can shoot plus do other things, that's kind of the sweet spot there for what you're really looking to add into a roster. And I really like Gradey Dick as an overall player in this year's draft, Austin.
Yeah, so now overall, we're going to we'll kind of conclude here with this. And I want you to name the team that you think is probably the best fit for him, and then just kind of wrap it up and your thoughts with him.
Yeah, I think Orlando, I referenced the Magic. I think that they are just flat out the best fit. They're a team that is desperate for shooting. I also mentioned Toronto earlier as a really good fit as well. That team really badly needs shooting as well. I think Toronto is a little bit closer to winning than Orlando, but Orlando's been really great the last 2-3 months of the season here, actually with a winning record in that duration. So, I could argue either of those spots are the best fits. Obviously, the Lakers could still use another guy like Gradey Dick. The Pelicans, I still think, yes, they have an abundance of wings, but a lot of their wings don't really do what Gradey Dick does. Trey Murphy does to a certain extent, but he's a little bit different, a little bit more athletic, a little bit more downhill attacker, defender type than what Gradey Dick is. This guy can fit on any roster at any moment. To be honest, if I'm any team even close to the lottery and he's available, I would really consider trading up if you need another shooter. He can be a big difference maker for a team playing around a star with how heliocentric the NBA is. I think that Gradey Dick's the perfect addition into pretty much any single roster at this point in the NBA. And whatever team gets him is not only going to get a really fun guy to root for, a great social media presence, but also just a really darn good basketball player.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks again, everybody, for watching. We appreciate all of the support here. Make sure to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss out on any more NBA draft content. Sheldon's coming out with videos almost daily with the NBA draft as it continues to ramp up as the time gets closer and closer. You have all the information you need when you watch his video, so make sure to hit that subscribe button. Also, leave a like if you did enjoy the content today. Sheldon put a lot of work and thought into this one, so it would be very much appreciated. Thanks again, guys. We'll catch you in the very next Utility Sports video.